I'm going to read you some words from a nation's constitution. As I do, think about which country this might be from, okay? Citizens, quote, enjoy freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, of association, of procession, and of demonstration. Which country do you think that is? That is China, where in reality, none of those things exist. Here's another country's constitution. Quote, citizens are guaranteed freedom of speech, the press, assembly, demonstration, and association. That's North Korea, which, like China, has no such freedoms. Islamist nations, meanwhile, have some similar language in their constitutions, although they barely even bothered to pretend. Coming up, I'll share a couple examples of that. Here's why this is so important, as America has just celebrated its 250th birthday. A written guarantee of freedoms is not unique to America or democracies. What distinguishes democracies is a system that gives people the power to enforce it, to demand that our leaders allow these freedoms. It's up to every generation to carry on that fight. That is what makes today's media failures so especially disastrous. I was invited to write a column about this for the 250th birthday. I'll tell you about that coming up. I'll share what I learned and more that I couldn't fit into that column, like President Obama's joke about a movie and how the press should have called that out. But first, two of the biggest so-called mainstream news agencies have been under fire in recent days. One for some reporting by an iconic, I guess, reporter, something she got wrong, and another for what a very highly paid journalist claimed. The first is NPR. Nina Totenberg thought that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito was retiring. She reported that. She has now done a mea culpa. The other is the New York Times, where sports reporter Diana Russini claimed that she got out of a traffic ticket by FaceTiming a prominent NFL figure, putting him on with the cop. Body cam footage from that incident has now been released.
Look what I said to him, though, just now.
Oh my God. KOC?
In both cases, the news agencies are using these screw-ups to pretend that they are oh so committed to ethics. But these incidents are nothing compared to what these same news agencies do every day. Plus, a new breaking twist in the saga of the disastrous Democratic Senate candidate in Maine, Graham Plattner. Why that is a media story. Coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you here. My name is Josh Lebs, and this is They Stand Corrected, the podcast that fact-checks the news. To every American who has just celebrated the July 4th holiday, I hope you had a great Independence Day, celebrating America's 250th anniversary. The United States is the oldest democracy, according to a list from the World Economic Forum. There's a map you can see. I have a link to it for you in the newsletter, which comes along with this show. Absolutely get the newsletter. It's free. It's filled with information. And the best way to support the show is to become a paid subscriber. Those folks get extra content. Anyway, this map shows America as the oldest, and it runs through Jamaica at 25. Israel is at 20, older than democratic Japan and India. Democracy is the exception in the world. 3/4 of humanity currently lives in autocracies, according to this latest annual report from an organization called VDEM. They look at democracy around the world. They wrote that the most autocratic region in the world is MENA, the Middle East and North Africa. There, only 2% of people reside in an electoral democracy, Israel. And around the world, democracy is backsliding. It takes an effort to fight for it. Freedom of the press is essential to it. That's why it's written into the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which was among the amendments 15 years after the nation's founding. I have a lot coming up for you about that. But first, some news to take care of. As I mentioned, there are paid subscribers to this show, and they are the first people I turn to in looking at what topics to cover. One sent me this as soon as it happened. This is from NPR.
We're here because we want to take some time to acknowledge an error we made today. We reported that Justice Samuel Alito is retiring. He's not. Nina, tell us what happened.
Well, we didn't. I did to my boss, and I scared everybody half to death for about 5 minutes. And it's entirely on me. It's not anybody else's fault.
That's Nina Totenberg. She has spent decades covering the Supreme Court. When I was at NPR, I did some segments with her. In her mea culpa on the air there, she said it was a rookie mistake. She had misunderstood something. This bad reporting lasted 5 minutes, but did damage. She wrote to Justice Alito apologizing, and she tried to take all responsibility herself. This NPR show, All Things Considered, also brought in Tommy Evans, NPR's editor-in-chief.
This is something that we should learn from and go back and figure out where we could do better and be better. But I think most importantly, we need to be honest with our audience and honest with the listeners that when we make a mistake, we own up to it and we own it, like Nina did, like I think we all are. And I think we will be a better news organization for it.
In the meantime, we will all continue reporting the news. We will do our best to get it right. When we don't get it right, we'll tell you why.
Virtually everything is wrong with what they just said there. First of all, the head of NPR knows that there's nothing to go back and figure out here. They trusted Nina, she screwed up. But what's more relevant is the general claims they're making. When we make a mistake, we own it. We'll do our best to get things right. And when we don't, we'll tell you why. They don't do that at all. This show here, we're now in the 116th episode. NPR comes up all the time. Starting with episode 1, NPR has lied about occupation. It lied about international law and Israel. This is not an opinion. These are straight up lies. NPR violates the most basic journalistic standards. I have played you clips of NPR calling an act of Islamist terrorism in Europe. But when similar acts by similar groups are primarily targeting Jews in Israel, NPR refuses to use the same terminology. NPR's public editor recently admitted that the attack on a synagogue in Michigan, it didn't occur to anyone at NPR to interview anyone who was inside that synagogue or parents of little kids who were there when the terrorists tried to kill them. However, NPR did run a sympathy piece about the terrorist. The network freaked out over Elon Musk mislabeling NPR as state-funded media. But at the same time, they refuse to state the fact that Al Jazeera is state-owned media from Qatar. But NPR acts in this case like they care about a mistake oh so much. This one thing that lasted 5 minutes, and in the end, no one is hurt by it. Oh, I should probably mention NPR's Morning Edition host, Steve Inskeep, went after me personally on social media. He made up something I didn't say so that he could argue with that. So those claims about NPR wanting to own up to errors and stuff, no. Anyway, that's one case that's in the news now. Here's another one. A sports reporter at the New York Times named Diana Russini. She's with this thing called The Athletic, owned by the New York Times. She has left the company amid an investigation over some things that she did. Reports, including from the New York Times, refer to it as a scandal. Some of it involves her personal relationship with New England Patriots head coach Mike Vrabel, but it also involves her claims about what happened during a traffic stop. This is where the New York Times hypocrisy shines so clearly. The Times recently ran a story that began by telling you, the reader, that in January, this reporter, Diana Russini, was pulled over by a police officer while texting and driving with her 2 young sons in the car. The report says she tried to fend off a ticket by telling the officer that the coach of the Buffalo Bills had been fired and that she was trying to break the news. The article says the officer was unmoved, telling her he was a fan of a different team. That's when she made him an offer. Maybe she could connect him right then and there to his favorite team's coach. This report then says that she was later on a podcast where she explained that in getting out of this ticket, she FaceTimed that unnamed head coach who helped her get out of the ticket. Okay, so the Times reported that this happened. It didn't occur to anyone there to question whether it really happened. The reporters, the editors, anyone who worked on this story, no one challenged this. The Times, however, did weigh in with a statement about her conduct. Here is a later part of that story.
She might have considered calling a coach to get out of a ticket not only appropriate, but a funny story to tell on a podcast. For The Athletic, under the ownership of The Times, it was out of bounds. Danielle Rhodes Ha, a Times company spokeswoman, described it as unacceptable conduct, adding that Athletic editors had been unaware of it because Ms. Russini neither sought nor received permission to appear on the podcast, as required by company guidelines.
Multiple issues to break down here. First, it turns out that didn't happen. Another site looked into it, a site called The Center Square. They got the body cam footage. She did name drop and get out of the ticket, but she did not FaceTime anyone. Not that that makes it okay. That's not the point. She made that part up in the podcast. When you're a journalist, you can't just embellish like that. You're not just telling a friend a story. Plus, records exist. There are body cams, and she could have known that that could be checked. Here is a clip from that body cam footage.
So, you're not going to care. I'm an NFL reporter, and I just wrote that Sean McDermott got fired from the Bills, and that is what I was just sending to send a tweet. I was going to pull over because I have to make calls.
Okay.
I know you don't care, but I'm just letting you know my reason why.
Okay.
It was a work thing, and it was an emergency for what I did.
In the video, it's not clear whether her sons were in the car. Neither of them references them, and we can't see the back. The officer ends up sharing that he's a fan of a different team, the Vikings. She pulls out her phone and shows messages that are apparently with Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell.
Can you see the name?
Oh my God. KOC?
See what I said? Look what I said to him, though, just now. Go to the bottom.
Oh my God. Wow. Pretty cool.
The officer ends up checking her record. He points out that he had followed her for a while and seen that she continued to be on her phone, but he lets her go.
I understand your job requires you to be on the phone a lot. Just try to wait till you get home, okay? And yeah, keep me updated with the Vikings, okay? Let me know if KOC is going to get a new quarterback in. Of course. All right, man. Take care.
So even though she clearly made up the part about the FaceTiming, the New York Times has kept its original story up. If you scroll down, there is now a 10th paragraph in brackets saying update. There's body cam footage of an incident that did not show a FaceTime call, pointing you to a separate story about that. In that separate story, the Times says it's not certain that the incident in the video is the same one she described. My awesome engineer, Don, sent me a clip from a guy named Mike Florio. This is NFL on NBC. In here, he talks about what the Times did.
It's not certain that that was the stop. That's your way to stick handle around saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't have assumed that she was telling the truth when she told this whopper of a tale. It's just interesting to see what news organizations do when they realize they've stepped in a pile of something that you try to not step in. The story she told was false, and that's still the hook. Anybody who trips across that story, they start reading, that's the hook to keep reading.
That's part of what they did wrong here. But then there's also that New York Times spokesperson talking about how her behavior was unacceptable and that her participation in a podcast without permission was against company guidelines. In previous episodes, I've told you about the Times' alleged guidelines, their ethical journalism handbook. The Times flagrantly violates guidelines in there all the time. I did an entire episode just correcting lies from Ezra Klein alone. He's a very prominent figure at the Times. Another opinion writer there, Michelle Goldberg, ran cover for Mamdani and hid basic, crucial facts. The Times news pages hid an Islamist terrorist attack in New York. It literally doesn't even tell its audiences that Islamist terrorism exists. It has not used that term in years, even as the terrorism has vastly increased. When one group killed as many as 160 people in a single massacre in Nigeria, the Times refused to say who did it. The Times also ran a headline saying, U.S. rejects vote to recognize slavery as a crime against humanity. That's a straight up lie. It literally did not happen. And of course, the Times recently ran an insane, nonsensical piece from Nicholas Kristof. I did an episode about that. So here's the deal. This and the NPR Alito situation are very similar in this sense. In both cases, it's as though they're showing that they take very seriously a smudge on a window of a penthouse while ignoring the fact that the entire building is on a shaky foundation that collapses as soon as the winds of truth come along. Does that analogy work? Yeah, I think it does. Hey, Don, my engineer, if you agree, then toss in a wind sound effect here. No wonder people don't trust the media anymore. I'm not saying that these two incidents don't matter. They do. But these news outlets are just using these incidents to claim that they are oh so ethical and oh so committed to doing the right thing journalistically all the time, which they factually are not. There's no excuse for this. Perhaps the biggest reason to care about media failure is that the freedom to tell the truth is so precious. That's coming up. NPR recently received $113 million from two extremely wealthy donors. And the network followed up by asking you to give money. NPR has been publishing social media posts saying, hey, we need you to give money to make all this work possible, right after those big donations were announced. They don't need your money. Since I left big media after my years both in NPR and CNN, I've seen so clearly that in this era, telling the truth, fact-checking, means getting away from big legacy bureaucratic media. Those places are poisoned. They're trading on the names they once had, but they're not pulling through for you. Not anymore. The media owes you the truth, which means facts plus context. It's not giving you both. But this show does, and this show runs on your support. No bazillionaires are funding this. You can support this show in different ways. You can use the Buy Me a Coffee link. There's also a PayPal link, or become a paid subscriber to the newsletter. The additional content you get includes information on how to access virtually any major news outlet online for free legally. News agencies operating with hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars don't need your hard-earned money. Show them that they stand corrected. Support this show and send a note to those other agencies saying why you're doing so. I have simple instructions in the newsletter. Or just visit my website, joshlevs.com. Basically, every country, perhaps literally every country, officially promises freedom of expression, including freedom of the press. Very few countries actually provide it. At the top of this episode, I told you about China and North Korea. In Islamist nations, meanwhile, there's barely even a pretense. The Constitution of Qatar, a country founded in 1971, says, quote, freedom of press, printing, and publication shall be guaranteed in accordance with the law. Well, the law prevents any such freedom of the press in Qatar. It's an absolute monarchy where it's illegal to criticize the government. Yet colleges send kids there to study anyway, and the whole time they only hear wonderful things about Qatar, and they arrive home brainwashed. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran, established in 1979, says publications and the press have freedom of expression except when it is detrimental to the fundamental principles of Islam or the rights of the public. The details of this exception will be specified by law. There's obviously no such freedom in Iran. Political prisoners are routinely slaughtered by the regime. As America celebrates its 250th anniversary, it's important to understand what actually creates this core freedom that many of us think of as being American, the freedom of expression. It's not a constitutional promise. Although that is where it starts. It's in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. What makes freedom of the press and all freedom of expression real is the set of systems that enforce the freedom. The power of voting is the key. The people can demand that our leaders protect that freedom. And it's a battle in every generation. This is the perfect example of an issue that is not right or left. It's just fundamental to democracy. Currently, the battle is against this administration, President Trump. He has called the press the enemy of the people. It is not the enemy of the people. He's launched personal lawsuits against news agencies while he's in a position to make decisions affecting their corporate owners. His cabinet members have been using new restrictions on press access. It's important to stand against all of that. And the media is being much louder and more active against the threats from this administration than they were against the actions of the Obama administration. A lot of people don't know what Obama did. He used unprecedented tactics to go after the press. Obama used an ancient law, the 1917 Espionage Act, to try to go after anyone leaking information. He got access to confidential communications between news agencies and sources. He got records of AP office phone lines and reporters' home lines and personal phones. There were these two guys with similar names who faced all this pressure from the administration. One was Fox reporter James Rosen. The administration named him a criminal co-conspirator in the process of getting a warrant. They went through his personal emails. Then there was James Risen at the New York Times. The Obama administration kept trying to make him name his sources. They used subpoenas and other methods. All this was just part of what Obama did. News agencies did report on this stuff at the time, but the news media as a community did not take the opportunity to demand that he stop. That brings us to something I've told you about on this show before, the White House Correspondents Association dinner, a terrible tradition that should not exist. Journalists should not be joking around with the people they're meant to cover and should not be trying so hard to feel fame adjacent. It's all gross. Anyway, earlier this year, before the planned dinner, there was this conversation on CNN.
More than 250 former journalists, including people like Dan Rather, Sam Donaldson, they wrote this: "We, the undersigned, call upon the Correspondents Association to use the occasion of the dinner to forcefully demonstrate opposition to President Trump's efforts to trample freedom of the press. These are not normal times, and this cannot be business as usual, with the press standing up to applaud the man who attacks them on a daily basis."
That was the host. Then panelist Rob Bluey, head of a conservative site, the Daily Signal, said this.
What president hasn't had a contentious relationship with the press? I mean, you can go back to Barack Obama and using the Espionage Act and going after the Associated Press and James Risen and James Rosen, over whistleblowers and things like that. You can go all the way back to FDR, who created an office of censorship during World War II.
Van Jones was part of this panel as well. He's a CNN contributor and generally has a healthy perspective on this stuff.
There's always this attempt to kind of say, oh, well, Trump's just like everybody else. You've never had a president suing news agencies for coverage he didn't like and forcing them to give him money. So I think he's uniquely unfriendly toward the press. But I don't think that it's appropriate for the reporter to say, this is the opportunity for us to do something that we don't always do.
Those words are really significant, something that we don't always do. See, the media does speak out now against Trump's intrusions on the free press, and should. But during the Obama era, when Obama was doing all those things I just talked about, they didn't do anything about it at the Correspondents Association dinner. Even when Obama engaged in this hypocritical joke at the final dinner of his administration in 2016, he pointed out that actors from the movie Spotlight were in the room.
Spotlight is a film, a movie about investigative journalists with the resources and the autonomy to chase down the truth and hold the powerful accountable. Best fantasy film since Star Wars.
Ha ha ha, that's so funny. Meanwhile, he had taken those unprecedented steps to prevent them from chasing down the truth and holding the powerful accountable. There was no response to what he said that night. I went looking. Did anyone even write about this? I didn't find any big hand-wringing reports about it. I did, however, find a tweet from the real guy played by Michael Keaton in Spotlight. Walter Robinson, editor-at-large of the Boston Globe, wrote, "Grateful to POTUS for Spotlight shout-out, but this president has used Espionage Act to thwart investigative reporting." And then he wrote, "Ask James Risen." So, while it makes sense to want the media to stand strongly against Trump's intrusions into freedom of the press, where were these people during the Obama administration? It's all the more reason for the media to stop that annual tradition. This year, the dinner was halted when a left-wing would-be assassin tried to kill Trump and other administration officials and was willing to kill anyone in the room. I reported on his manifesto. The media should be doggedly fighting for press freedom in every generation, never letting a president get away with a joke like that while going after journalism. I was invited to write a column about all this for The Contrarian. I'm going to read you part of it here. Upholding democracy isn't easy. We have to demand it. And free expression is one of its most essential cornerstones. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis wrote in 1927, the founders believed that freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think are means indispensable to the discovery and spread of political truth, and that public discussion is a political duty. To fulfill this duty, citizens need the facts. That's why I can't stand the constant onslaught of inaccuracies and lies from the media. News giants have precious freedom to deliver the truth. There's no excuse for failing to. As we kick off the next century of America's existence, we have the chance to strengthen it, to demand truth from the media while protecting its freedom from government interference. The more we do that, the more we'll turn the promises of the Constitution into reality. I'll be right back.
My country, 'tis the sweet land of liberty, of the I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
To demand the right actions from our leaders, we have to know the facts. That includes data, and a lot of it comes from the government. What the government tells us about the economy, health, crime, about everything should be true. All too often, it isn't. But we can change that. We have to demand this. We have to act. And we can do something very simple. It only takes 1 minute. I am happy to partner with USA Facts on a petition demanding truth from the government. Thanks to a sponsorship, if you sign this petition today, you'll be helping support this show. It's very brief. You need to use my unique link, which you can find in the show notes and newsletter. Please join me in demanding truthful public data. Sign now. Thanks. The story of a disastrous Democratic Senate candidate in Maine has taken a new turn. I've told you about him before, Graham Plattner, a clearly disturbed extremist. His Nazi tattoo has gotten lots of attention, but there's lots of stuff about him that was buried by the news, like him still being on a dating site known for having terrible controls about underage girls. He was still on that site when the Wall Street Journal reported on it just a few months ago. This is a media story. In a previous episode, I told you about how his ex-girlfriend spoke to the New York Times and alleged disturbing behavior. After the story finally published, she called out the Times for burying crucial parts of her story in order to help him. Now, there are new reports indicating that he did something even worse to another ex, and that she was inspired to come forward partly because the New York Times blew it so badly. A headline in Politico says, exclusive, woman who dated Graham Plattner says he sexually assaulted her. He insists that any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically untrue. In the previous episode, 112, I played you sound from Senator John Fetterman pointing out that this guy, Graham Plattner, has a long history of lying about all kinds of things. So there's a relevant question about who will believe him now. It's also a lot harder for the media to write off this story because the woman speaking out now, Jenny Rassicot, says she agrees with him politically. The news about this is just breaking now, so check out the newsletter in the coming days for more details. Even with the track record of things that Graham Plattner definitely did, voters should have already been able to recognize how unfit he is for office. But people have been radicalized by the news. So as long as he screams the worst possible things about Israel and tosses in enough hatred of billionaires and Trump, he gets support. The news owes everyone better. The press has not only freedom, but power. And you know what comes with great power. Actually, that line, with great power comes great responsibility, is usually attributed to Spider-Man comics. The character did say it, but versions of that expression go back to at least the 1700s. If the news was genuinely committed to ethics, owning up to mistakes, and following guidelines, we wouldn't be in this mess as a nation. We need common, trustworthy sources of truth. That's what you get here. I keep hearing from people who say they've been on the right or left most of their lives and have come together here. Keep those messages coming. I love hearing from you all. There are two great ways to reach me. The best is through the newsletter, and the second is through a form at my website. I read every message. Before you go, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. All those great things. They make a big difference in the algorithm era that we are all stuck in. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.